Big day down on the Hill. Our chief legal correspondent Katie Barlow with us tonight, talking about the special counsel Robert Hur, who was investigating the now President Biden for retaining classified documents while he was vice president, once he became a private citizen, and what came of those questions from the House Judiciary Committee today. A lot of fireworks there.
Yeah, he took pretty heated questions from both sides of the political aisle today. Democrats going after him for the way that he drafted this report. It's already made headlines. You may remember he called President Biden a well-meaning elderly man. That's relevant. We'll get to why. But he also took heat from Republicans who were pressing him on why he made the decision he did to ultimately not prosecute President Joe Biden, even though he found in his investigation that President Biden willfully retained unauthorized classified documents. So I want to talk about the law that's at the center of this case. It's important here because actually President Trump is being actually prosecuted for this same law that we're talking about in President Biden's case. In Trump's Mar-a-Lago case, it's dealing with his unauthorized retention of documents. Here it is right on your screen right now. These are the three things that Robert Hur would have to prove in order to prosecute Joe Biden: that there was national defense information in those documents, that he unauthorized possession of those documents, and willful retention of those documents. I want to hone in on that willful right there because that's the key, and that word really is why special counsel Rob Hur explained today on the Hill that he ultimately decided not to prosecute President Biden, in part because, as he said in his report, Biden's memory is, quote, significantly limited. So Rob Hur's burden would be to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury that President Biden knew what he was doing was wrong when he kept those documents, and he thinks he would have a difficult time doing that Biden would have a number of defenses there. So that willful is the key to Rob Hur's ultimate conclusion, and perhaps what special counsel Jack Smith interpreted differently in Trump's case based on the evidence he's collected there.
And this is the big disagreement here between both political parties, because you could argue that both men should face the same charges under the same act, because apparently they both were alleged to have retained these documents as private citizens once they had left office. Robert Hur said under oath, right, that this was willful retention. And then he also combated some of the congressmen there and people saying that he did not exonerate him by not prosecuting him. What does that tell you?
Yeah, there was a lot of pressing Robert Hur today on whether he exonerated President Biden. Exonerates means says that he is absolutely innocent. And Hur pushed back pretty strongly, saying that's not what he did, in a pretty heated exchange with Congresswoman Jayapal from Seattle in Washington. She said, you exonerated him, and he clearly, kind of maybe in the most heated moment of today's testimony, pushed back, saying, I did not exonerate him. He said that was not his charge. He walked through the evidence in his nearly 300-page report and his ultimate conclusions as a prosecutor, again, keeping in mind that burden that he would have to meet, which is proving to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Biden willfully kept these documents or willfully disclosed these documents. Now, there is also a question here about Biden's ghostwriter for his former memoir, or for his memoir that came out, and that the ghostwriter actually had audio recordings of his conversations with Joe Biden and deleted those audio recordings after Rob Hur was appointed. And so there was some question there of whether that was obstruction of justice, since it was after Rob Hur was appointed. Now, we'll get into more details coming up at 5 on exactly why Rob Hur decided not to ultimately prosecute the ghostwriter. But a lot of questions there and a lot of details we'll get into.
I am curious, and I don't know if you can answer this quickly, but as a prosecutor, is the onus still on you to prosecute the case regardless of who your defendant may be or their mental acuity, if you will?
Well, that was also a hypothetical that came up today. Would you prosecute the same person if they were 65 and had a perfect memory? Now, Rob Hur refused to answer any hypothetical like that and ultimately made his conclusions based on the facts that were in front of him, and he didn't believe that he could prove to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Biden was, again, willful here.
Could this set any sort of, even though it was not prosecuted, judicial precedent for the case before Jack Smith and Donald Trump?
No, I don't think there'll be any overlap here. Jack Smith has his own train on that track, and they're moving along, actually, in Florida before Judge Cannon.
All right, we'll see what happens there. Katie Barlow for us, breaking down today's big day on the Hill.